As Toriyama was writing the Dragon Ball manga, he progressively made it more and more dark. What started as a lighthearted adventure story became a grim and somewhat dark perspective of Toriyama's inner turmoil, but at the end of the day, Toriyama would pretty much always conclude his story arcs with a happy ending. Either Goku, or at one time Gohan, mostly Goku, would save the day and everything would return to harmony, although sometimes there was always that lingering fear of what was to come from the characters. It always seemed to be back to Capsule Corp, back to celebrating life with the richest family on earth, eating good food and relaxing with our loved ones. The good guys winning at the end of the story is classic fiction, not just with manga, but also with stories that have been told by humanity for thousands of years. The good guys winning brings closure to the story and often concludes with the villains getting their comeuppance and usually paying for their evil acts, whether it be through death or through suffering, in contrast of all of the pain they caused our protagonists. But sometimes, once in a while, in Dragon Ball, the villains got their way. And on this edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, we're going to be discussing the times when the Dragon Ball villains won and got their way. And maybe they didn't get the ultimate victory because at the end of the day, peace was restored, but a lot of times it came at a price. Let's talk about that next. Well, yeah, sometimes bad stuff does happen in Dragon Ball, and the payoff at the end makes it worth it, which is totally true. One thing you have to understand about Toriyama is that he is a gag manga writer. He always has been. He likes to entertain people, make them laugh, and make them feel good. With Dragon Ball, he created a much more epic story that had to have villains doing bad things and had to have good guys, protagonists, in unusual and at times threatening situations. Dr. Slump, his previous work before Dragon Ball, at least his previous major work he had for many years, and the manga that made him famous was all gags. But in Dragon Ball, he kind of went for a more kung fu-esque sort of adventure story that kind of transitioned into this science fiction, battle heavy shonen series essentially, and inspired many more in the future. So when talking about the villains winning, the first villain that comes to mind goes all the way back to Dragon Ball, and that is Demon King Piccolo. And people don't really talk about this too often, but if you remember, Demon King Piccolo, Piccolo Daimao, at one time proclaimed himself the king of the earth and threatened to destroy a sector of the earth until the entire thing was chaotic. He took pleasure in the suffering of people, because we later found out that Demon King Piccolo was indeed pure evil, because he was the evil side of the son of Katatsu, otherwise known as Kami, God, whatever you want to call him. So even though he did not win and Goku triumphantly defeated him, even though he did beat Goku and almost killed him in their first fight, his revenge came from his son, Piccolo Jr., Ma Jr. And although Piccolo Jr. never really intended for things to go the way they did, at the end of the day, Piccolo created the Makanko Sappo technique to kill Goku during the 5-year skip between Dragon Ball and what will be known as the Dragon Ball Z section of the story, the arrival of Raditz. And during that fight, Piccolo used the move to kill both of them. So even though it may not have been a evil act necessarily, it was still something that Piccolo wanted to do, being the reincarnation of his father, being Ma Jr., and his murder of Goku pretty much became his revenge. As weird as it may sound, it was like an indirect, revenge from beyond the grave, if that makes sense to you. I don't know. Right before the Piccolo arc was the Red Ribbon Army arc, and the Red Ribbon Army was dismantled by Goku. I mean, Goku single-handedly wrecked shop on the entire army and took everybody out. And when he did that, he never thought it would come back to haunt him. But it did years later in Dragon Ball Z with the advent of Cell and the artificial humans, which were created by one of the leftovers that Goku never took out from the Red Ribbon Army, Dr. Gero, otherwise known as Dr. Gero in the English dub. This guy had a hard-on for making Goku suffer and thus created several killing machines to go after him. I mean, it wasn't just one android, it was a lot of them. And the apex creation was, of course, Cell. And Goku's second death in Dragon Ball Z came at the hands of Cell. And yes, it was self-sacrifice. It was something that Goku chose to do, much like his previous death with Raditz and Piccolo I just discussed, but it was still a measure of revenge. At the end of the day, the scientist got what he wanted. He sent all these killing machines after Goku, and at the end of the day, Goku still died, albeit only for about 7 years, but he did. And his son would take up the mantle and finish Cell off. But still, it's an example of the villains winning. Now, things get really interesting when we get to Dragon Ball Super. But before we do, I want to touch on Kid Buu. Kid Buu did blow up the Earth, which could be seen as a victory, but he was later defeated and they did reverse the effects of that. So it's a tough one. It's a gray area. Also, Kid Buu had no personal vendetta against Goku. That's not what happened. Majin Buu was just a pure evil sociopathic monster that wanted to destroy anything he could. Now, moving on to Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F or Dragon Ball Super's Resurrection F arc, whichever one you want to touch on, Frieza did get his revenge, even though it was only for about 6 minutes. When Frieza lost to Vegeta, Frieza's final desperate attack was to destroy the entire planet Earth, and right then and there, it seemed like they were screwed, but Whis reversed time. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up Frieza is because the entire Resurrection F plotline is Frieza's revenge. You could have even called the movie The Revenge of Frieza, and it would have been the same sort of concept. And he did get his revenge because he killed many of Goku's loved ones on Earth, as well as put them in a very bad crisis. Had it not been for Whis being able to reverse what happened with his time reversal technique, they would have lost that fight as well. So Frieza did get his revenge, albeit it was only for a few seconds, and unfortunately, he doesn't even remember it because of what Whis did, getting involved in matters that he shouldn't get involved in, even though he knows he should not get involved. Now, the big time in Dragon Ball when a villain actually did win was with Zamasu, the villain of the Future Trunks arc. Zamasu terrorized the future timeline, and after a hugely long battle back and forth between the good guys and bad guys at many different intervals, what ended up happening was Trunks sliced him in half, and his essence, because of his immortality, became one with the universe. It's a very unique and interesting thing, which I did outline in my Strongest in Dragon Ball Merge Zamasu video. So Zamasu's essence fused with the universe, and after he terrorized the future timeline and killed many people, including future Bulma, at this point, the future timeline was completely lost and there was nothing they could do, to where Goku had to push the magic button to bring in Zeno, the Omni King of the multiverse, to destroy this polluted timeline. And they ended the arc by having Trunks and Mai be sent to another timeline that they made, where there's another double of them to live out their life for some reason, in a very unsatisfactory ending, if you ask me. Because to me, you don't have to have a happy ending, but everything that was built up in that arc was supposed to be mortals versus gods. That was the theme of that arc, and yet the series reversed it on itself to where a god wound up beating a god, which to me was honestly poor writing. And the future timeline winds up getting wiped out. So to me, even though the present timeline was safe and everybody was okay there, the fact that timeline got wiped out pretty much shows that Zamasu got his way. He killed every mortal. He ruined everything in that timeline. He was the ultimate winner of that arc, even though he wound up getting literally wiped away from existence by Zeno at the end of the day. He still won. And to me, it was a powerful ending, an unsatisfactory ending. I can see what they were going with that ending, but at the end of the day, it was still a victory for Zamasu. So these are some small examples of the villains actually getting W's in the series, and significant W's as well, because anytime the main character dies, or anytime something like this happens where there's hugely amounts of damage to the series or to the people, it's important and impactful. And with the Trunks arc specifically, that's irreversible. I mean, yeah, they could have probably gotten the Super Dragon Balls and done something about it, but when Zeno wiped it out, it was done. And they never bothered to do that. So With that being said, I will bring this video to a close. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy this video, like it and leave a comment giving your thoughts on the times the villains won. Take care of yourself and each other. Catch you down the road.